Hello. Thank you all so much for joining today. My name is Morgan. Um, I am a doula. I'm a farmer, former farmer, still a gardener, and I'm a chef. And I run and organize a doula practice that's been based in Los Angeles for the last 11 years called Cottage Inside. Um, and I work mostly with high profile moms throughout their preconception periods, all the way through their pregnancies. And I really specialize in postpartum. I specialize in postpartum nutrition, in Ayurvedic care, self-care treatments, and I offer a traditional Ayurvedic program for clients that is called in Sanskrit Sutika Paricharya, which is the self-care routine and indications for rejuvenation after you've had your baby. Now, because my background is in food and farming before I was a doula, I started this practice in 2014. So, actually, the anniversary of my first baby is coming up on December 2nd. And today is the 21st of November. So, very soon, coming up on celebrating the 11th year of my practice. I started this practice while I was actually living in New York on the east end of Long Island, and I was still in my farming career. So my my background before I started this doula practice was in small scale, very high quality organic farming. And I started that up in Northern California in Marin County, working on a small farm. It's a very, very special place. It's called Green Gulch, and it's part of the San Francisco Zen Center. And I trained in farming in the French intensive biodynamic methods, which was taught by an English horticulturist named Alan Chadwick, who came to California in the 1960s or 70s, and started lots of wonderful organic gardens here in California. He started the gardens at UC Santa Cruz that the CASPIS agricultural program still uses, and he helped us um, start the gardens at Green Gulch, which by the time I came there in the 2010s, I went first to Green Gulch in 2012 to study Zen, to study Japanese Soto Zen, and to farm, which you can do there simultaneously. By the time I went there, had become, one of the models in organic farming on a small scale. And it's quite the legendary place. And I was very, very lucky to study there when I did. Um, but we grew, we always grew on a small scale. Um, and my expertise during that time became particularly farming for restaurants. So I was farming, growing very, very high quality, really pristine vegetables. We had some fruits as well, but what we sold mostly was very high quality, pristine vegetables on a smaller scale. So I have always specialized more in lettuces and greens, and everything in my garden is always done by hand. So if you think of heirloom quality vegetables, that's always been my specialty. And then after Green Gulch 2014, I left and went to New York, and I was farming on the east end of Long Island, again, for mostly restaurant accounts, and then started my doula practice there in New York briefly, and then came to LA shortly after, and then went into full-time doula work. But I've always had one foot sort of in and out of the food world. And because I have such a long history with growing very high quality, pristine food for preparation on a commercial level, growing food to be presented and prepared as art in a very high quality way. My doula practice sort of began to blend all those things together. So Wow, it's been over 10 years now, and I've had a beautiful, thriving practice in Los Angeles that I'm very grateful for. And now I'm planning the next chapter. I'll be spending some time in Europe. And as part of my big pivot, I'm opening up a mentorship with me for postpartum professionals for the first time. So I'm super excited to invite you all in and to show you how I do things. So, because the food that I prepare for my clients is so targeted, it passes through a few lenses, and I think it would be really interesting to talk about that for you all if you're interested today. So, I thought I would offer this brief workshop as sort of a teaser to get everybody excited about the mentorship and to give you a little peek into my world and how my mind works and what I look for when I go to the farmers market to shop for clients to prepare them for their postpartum meals for the week. Um, when I'm thinking about food for the postpartum, there's lots of lenses that are sort of overlapping. So there's lots of layers, if you will, that sort of the food will trickle down through to make it to the bottom. And that becomes the sort of the finished postpartum appropriate seasonal local dishes. Now, the first thing that we think about, or the first thing that I think about, is that the food that's prepared has to be functionally nutritious. So we need to know what are the foods that mothers who are healing need to be consuming. So that's looking at where is she in her healing? What's going on with the physiology of her body? What nutrients does she need to make high quality, high fat content breast milk for her baby if she's breastfeeding? And then beyond that, where is her digestion in her postpartum phase? And what can she handle? So it's what are we feeding her? What ingredients are we sourcing? And then once we get back to the kitchen, how are we preparing that in a way that is conducive for her system where it's at? So there's the functional nutrition lens that we start with. That tells us what foods are nutritious for the postpartum mom in the specific constitutional state that she's in, for the production that she's in. She's healing from her birth, she's healing tissues, her uterus is contracting back to the pre-pregnant state. She has very low digestive fire. And then Ayurveda shows us not only what food should we be consuming, but how to prepare it in a way that is optimally digested for a very particular constitution. So there's functional nutrition, there's Ayurveda comes into play, and then there's seasonality. There's what is growing in our local season. Now, what I find is that when you're eating seasonally, the environment is producing, or rather, the conditions of the environment produce certain nutrients and qualities in the food that are in turn conducive for our state in that season. So, for example, if you take summer season, so something like a seasonal ripe tomato in the summer has very high content of lycopene. So that is a food that is very hydrating. It actually has natural sun protection in small quantities. It has all of these properties that balance our system for that season. Other things that grow in summer that are very conducive to summer, which is a pitta or fire constitution in the climate. Watermelon, very hydrating, has nutrients like vitamin A and C. Cucumber, cooling, very hydrating. Foods that are that are easier to digest raw when your digestion is really up high in the summer. So things match out. Now in fall season, we have lots of things like winter squash, or apples. Um, if you think of a winter squash, it's a vined vegetable, so it's tethered to the ground. And what constitution are we in the autumn? Vata, which is an air constitution, space constitution. So we tend to be a little floaty, a little light, more anxiety producing, colder. We need grounding. And what's the property of a lot of things that you see in market in the fall? Things that are tethered to the ground, or things sometimes that even grow underground or in the dark. And they produce things like vitamin D, because the conditions in the environment are lower light. And so the things that we are deficient in, the produce of that season oftentimes will produce, like a sweet potato, very high in vitamin D, or a carrot who likes a cooler temperature, or spinach. So Mother Nature takes care of us. So if we learn to work with nature, we can settle into a form that ends up being very conducive and nourishing for our bodies. So that's what I encourage everybody to do. And that's the way that I practice when I go to shop for food and when I plan menus. So I'm going to talk you through this week's market haul. I think first I'll sort of talk you through my structure. So when I'm working with clients, I shop as frequently as possible because I put a lot of emphasis on high prana meals, which means that the food is prepared as freshly as possible, as close as possible to the date of the harvest. So when you pull the carrot out of the ground, for example, it starts to decay at that moment that it's removed from its growing conditions. So the longer that fresh produce is stored outside of its growing conditions, the more it starts to lose its prana. Now, we always like take things with a grain of salt. You can't go to the garden and pull your carrot out of the garden right before you cook it. Although, is that my dream? Yeah, that's my dream. I love this French idea of having your house and having your kitchen garden right out the back door of the kitchen. It's called potager. Always a part of an estate in a lot of European places. You really would grow. That would be your refrigerator, would be the small kitchen garden right outside your kitchen. Is that the dream? Yeah, we'll do our best. If you need to store things longer, you will. It's fine. It's just to sort of get this form or these guidelines or these truths, if you will, out there into your consciousness. The longer things are stored, the more they begin to lose their prana. So farmers markets are a great way to source foods that are higher in vitality, higher in their life force, which is more nutritious and vibrant for our body, because the produce that's brought to the farmer's market is harvested usually sometimes it's harvested that morning and brought in, if not within 24 hours. It's the standard. And of course, everything in the farmer's market is what's growing seasonally in your local area. So when I go to the farmer's market, I have a formula in my mind, and it's memorized. I've been doing this for a long time. So for me, it's sort of second nature. I don't keep lists. I just go to the market, and I'm organized to go to the market with my setup. And I arrive at the market and I start to walk around the market and I pull from what I see. I pull from what looks good. I pull in certain categories. And then when I get home, I look at what I've extracted from the market, what I've gathered within my little categories, and I write the menus from that haul. So I never write the menus first and then go to market. I go to market first and then I write the menus. Your clients have to be okay with that. So if they're a family who likes to see the menus put out ahead of time, you actually could shop a week ahead. So you could not buy the food, but you could go on a scouting trip, and you could just keep a list and write down what the produce is that's available. And then you would write it, say that you went to the market on Sunday, you would be writing for not the coming week, but the week after. And then you could present the proposed menus to your clients, they could approve them, and then you could make any edits needed, and then do your actual purchased pull or purchase shop the next weekend. That's one way to do it. Most of my clients trust me. They just tell me to cook what I think they should have. So I do it usually in real time. When I go to the market again, I'm shopping in categories. So I'm thinking to myself, I need 5 categories. Four of them, about 4 of them usually come from the market. The fifth there's like a fourth and a fifth that is more of a pantry item. So the first category is your proteins. So depending on what phase she's in her postpartum time, and there are 4 phases as I teach, depending on what phase she's in, I will use different either plant proteins or animal proteins that work with the digestive abilities of the postpartum constitution within that stage. So first phase postpartum is birth to day 5. This is the milk initiation phase, and this is when the digestive fire is the lowest it will be. So she needs really, really what I call peaceful, easy food in the first 5 days. So those are your easiest to digest proteins. Second phase is day 5 to day 10. And that's really, it's almost like the first 2 phases it's a 2-part first phase. But we just graduate up a little bit because when the milk comes in, the appetite will jump a little bit. So I kind of distinguish day 0 to 5. We expect her to really have little to no appetite. So we have to sort of stay on it. We need to give her the types of foods that are going to be basically her body can receive those nutrients without having to produce any digestive fire, because she has very, very low digestive fire. If you imagine at the end of pregnancy, if her digestive fire is like a bonfire at the end of pregnancy, by the time she goes through labor and has come out on the other side in the first 5 days postpartum, what has been burning as a bonfire has come down to like a blue flame. So what happens if you put too much on top of the blue flame? It gets snuffed out. So day 0 to 5, you're trying to rekindle that digestive fire, and you do that through very easy to digest, albeit very highly nutritious foods. So first phase, 0 to 5 days. Second phase, day 5 to 10. Days 10 to 21, you're starting to introduce different kinds of proteins. You're starting to introduce some animal proteins. And then the fourth phase would be days 21 to 42. And per Ayurveda, per most traditional postpartum traditions or postpartum practices, culturally speaking, postpartum phase is defined as the first 6 weeks or so. And that's really based around the time that it takes the uterus physiologically to return back to its pre-pregnant state. So the time that the physiology of the mother's body is in motion, returning back from the expansion of pregnancy. So I'm going around, and my client this week, the midweek shopping trip that I did was to the Santa Monica Farmers Market, which is a chef's market, the Wednesday market. So the market where a lot of restaurants do their pre-orders, go and pick up. There's a chef's early access. It is a local market, but it's geared more towards commercial kitchens. And there's a lot of home cooks that go there too. But it's a big market. And if you're in the Los Angeles area, that's a great market to go to. Hollywood Farmers Market on Sundays in Hollywood at like sunset. It's on Evar between Hollywood and Sunset. That's my favorite market of all time. And really my hometown market, my home market is Hollywood Farmers Market. So when I'm working with clients, I do 2 markets a week, and it depends on where I am. So if the client is in a certain location, I always go to Hollywood Farmers Market, which is the weekend market. And then depending on where the client is, I'll do a second market in the week. That's a bit more local to them. If you're in Los Angeles, my favorite markets are Hollywood Farmers Market on Sundays Santa Monica Farmers Market, which has a Wednesday morning market and a Saturday market. And then Friday markets, depending on where I am, good little markets are Venice Market. And then for fun, definitely the Topanga Farmers Market on Friday mornings. It opens quite late, which is one of the cons of that market. But if you have a day free, morning free, pop up to Topanga because they have a really nicely curated market, curated actually by a former client of mine. Really sweet little market. You can get great meats, you can get all kinds of produce. There's an oyster vendor that goes there that shucks oysters, so you can get your minerals there. Those are my fix. And then there's a secret market that I'll never tell anyone about. Because it's very, very dear to me and it's a gem that we like to protect, but a fabulous little small family biodynamic farm that has a little pop-up market on the weekends as well. So when I'm setting up for a market, I pack in a way, or I set my card up in a way where I can just quickly organize as I'm going through. So I've posted on my stories and my highlights, you can see that I always pull a wagon. So I don't want to be hauling, especially in the fall, like you're hauling, I mean, anytime. Summer, you're carrying watermelons. Fall, we've got pumpkins, potatoes, things that are heavy. So I always suggest to take something that's on wheels. Maybe that's a cart. Um, I pull a wagon because it's easier for me to visualize. I don't like things stacked vertically because it's hard to protect the produce. I like everything in one layer. The restaurants you'll see will carry a flat and they'll have crates stacked on the flat. Um, I carry a wagon and I have a compartmentalized bag like this bag, beautiful bag from Agnes Badu, which was a gift from a client of mine several years ago. And I use this bag all the time for everything. So that, you can find compartmentalized bags like this. And I really recommend something like this because as you're thinking about shopping in categories, hitting categories, in an organizational way, you can actually organize things. So I take something like this that would be for non-refrigerated, and then I have cooler bags that are more of like a boxed, insulated, cubed bag with straps, and that goes into my cart as well. And I pack ice packs in there. And then I always carry, a little stack of folded canvas bags just so I have some extra options to categorize things. But all that stays in my trunk. And then when I get to market, that cart comes out, that wagon comes out, I set it up, and I put everything before I even go into market. I have sort of my catch-alls ready so that, when I'm ready to buy these things, it can just go straight into the category. And then I can look down and I can think, okay, I have all of my categories here. I have all the place that each thing I'm looking for is going in. And then I'm thinking, how many days am I cooking for? So if I go to market twice a week, say that I have a 4-day week, which is usual for me, I'm cooking 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. I would do a Sunday market. And what I buy for the Sunday market would be for Monday and Tuesday. And then Wednesday morning, I would go to that morning market and then go straight to my clients. And what I buy at the Wednesday morning market would be what I would cook for Wednesday and Thursday. And that's the shop that I'm talking you through that I'm talking you all through today is the shop that I did on Wednesday. And that's what I cooked on Wednesday and on Thursday for my postpartum client who is in her last phase postpartum. So she was in week 5, which is fourth phase, final phase. So setup, the categories that I cook for, again, are your proteins, which because my client is in phase 4, the proteins include eggs in maybe eggs once a week. We don't do too many eggs because they can be quite clogging. But I did pick up some nice organic pastured eggs. So eggs, grass-fed beef that is bone-in, meant for slow cooking, poultry, and fish. Those are the 4 categories for phase 4 postpartum. So that's what I'm thinking of. I'm going to get meats in those categories and animal products in those categories. Um, I always pull legumes. Legumes are in all of my meals, because that kind of fiber is very, very nice for removing excess toxins and excess hormones from the body. You want to be careful with legumes in the postpartum time because you are producing milk. So you need to be careful about balancing the things that you eat that are a bit more detoxifying, if that makes sense, because you don't want to overly remove, you don't want to take everything out of your body because some of those hormones that are coursing through, like prolactin and oxytocin, you actually need to support your healing and to support your lactation. So legumes properly prepared, I always combine them with a grain. Legumes are very important. They keep the body very clean. Um, and then I'm looking at my vegetables. So I always source vegetables in three categories. Dark leafy greens or some sort of leafy green. That's, again, easy to digest. And there aren't many that I use. There's three types that I look for in particular that I really rely on. Dark leafy greens or some sort of leafy green. Color vegetables, which would be any non-green vegetables. So that could be a carrot or a winter squash or what's another color vegetable? Lots of root vegetables, beetroot, things like that. They have color to them. Um, and then a green vegetable. So easy to digest green vegetables. So three vegetable categories: green vegetables, color vegetables, and leafy greens. Then I'm looking at healthy fats. Those are really important. So here in California, I'm always picking up avocados. We have really beautiful olive oils that I get from the farmers market that are local. Nuts, I find a lot right now. The beautiful red walnuts are in season, and I actually buy them still in the shell from a vendor called K&K Ranch, who farm up in Ojai, and they're really good friends of mine. I always try to pull something for myself that I think of as like a kitchen meditation. So I like to sit and, sort of meditate on kitchen tasks. So for me, shelling a nut, so shelling a pecan or shelling a walnut, sometimes I find hazelnuts in the wintertime that I can shell, that I can sit there and crack. I integrate that into my practice. I sit there and I just mindfully crack nuts and shell them by hand, and you get a better price on them too. So usually Sundays, that's kind of my routine. I, go to a market, I do my routine, I see some friends, and then I come back to put everything away and process it. In the afternoon, I just kind of take a beat and I do some sort of meditative kitchen project. So that could be like peeling almonds, taking the skins off almonds is one Sunday afternoon kitchen meditation that I do a lot. Um, Cracking nuts, shelling beans is another really beautiful, rhythmic, repetitive task that actually ends up being quite enjoyable and restful. And I might put a show on and watch that while I do it, or I might put on a podcast or just listen to some music or just, sort of meditate in that way. I highly recommend it. When it becomes meditative, when it becomes repetitive, it's a form of meditation. So you sort of plug into the repetitive, like, the practice of cracking that nut or, taking the top off that bean and peeling the string down and peeling it. And it plugs you into your body. So it can definitely be a practice of mindfulness. And I encourage everybody to find those little kitchen meditations and sort of be present in those moments in that way and to use those practices as anchors. So when I get to market, I'm thinking of these categories. I know what I need to pick up. I enter the market always in the same spot. I park in exactly the same spot and I go in exactly the same way. And for me, because I'm very meticulous about my organization, I always walk in the same direction. So I enter a market, I go to my right, and I only stay on one side. I focus on one side of the market and I move around counterclockwise. I go through everything and then I come back out where I've started. So I just focus on one stand at a time. And I don't worry about seeing everything at market first and then pulling something. I just go in and I start where I start and I see what I see. And Once you go to market 10 times, you'll have more or less memorized what is usually available, and then it changes by season. So it's an adventure. This is intuitive cooking. So just know that like you can't really mess it up if you're on a budget. So if you're going in and you have a budget, the way I do a budget, I don't want to be slowed down at market because market can feel kind of overwhelming. There's a lot going on. You're having to deal with money and paying, and sometimes you've got stuff in your hands and there's a line. So you're not going to have time to really sit there and do math. I would suggest walking into the market with your weekly budget in cash. So maybe have like a little belt bag or something where a little envelope where your budget for the week is in that envelope in cash. And, kind of track, like especially track your meat because that's going to be the bigger part of the budget. But that's how I would do if my client has given me a budget and they want me to stick within that budget for the week. I still do intuitive cooking, but I track that budget for the week. Or sometimes I even have separate envelopes. I'll allocate a portion of that budget for the meat. I'll allocate a portion of that budget for the vegetables, and I need to hit those categories before that budget is gone, is depleted. So I kind of track it that way and I check in. But that's how I would meet a budget. Um, I had another thought there. What was it? Oh, the market gets busy. So always arrive just shortly before the market opens. You got to get up early. If you're going to do the farmer's market, you just do. Most commercial markets will open at 8 a.m. in my experience. So I park at 7:40 and I go into the market when they open. There's a category I didn't mention, and that's grains. Grains are enormously important for breastfeeding. Less important for fertility. So if you have a client that's in the preconception phase, grains are less important for us generally, but during breastfeeding and during pregnancy as well, when you're gearing up for your nutrients, really nice, whole, clean, pesticide-free grains are crucial. You must. Your client's gluten-free, lots of gluten-free grains like rice, quinoa, millet, things like that. You don't have to include wheat. Although per Ayurveda, clean wheat is very, very nutritious. It's sweet in property, which is very balancing for the postpartum constitution, but certainly not necessary if your client has a gluten allergy or a gluten sensitivity. But grains for breastfeeding are non-negotiable. The body really needs grains and really nice, easy to digest, non-problematic carbs to build that milk. So make sure that your client is also hitting their grain um, their grain category. So when I go into market again, I'm working around clockwise. So I always pull fruits as well. I'll always do seasonal fruits. So this week it's autumn. So this week was the second half of November. So you're sort of end of the autumn season. This is Vata season, which I always say the best time to have a baby is right before Thanksgiving because the environment is producing the foods that are also constitutionally balanced for the postpartum constitution. So we're in a Vata season, and moms in the postpartum time are in a Vata constitution. So they do tend to be airier. They're in an airier constitution. They're in a more spacious constitution. They tend toward being cold and dry. And everything produced in this season, all of these beautiful Thanksgiving foods are also already naturally conducive for this time. So it's a great time to have your baby. Plus, I always say like it's almost Oscar time and the screeners are coming out over the holidays. So what better time if you're in Los Angeles and in our beautiful entertainment community than to lay in bed with your baby and ask all your friends for the screeners or get your own if you're a member of the Academy and sit in bed and watch movies, watch shows and movies and just rest and heal your body and learn how to breastfeed your baby. That's really all you're expected to do in postpartum time. So what did I get at market this week? Fall's my favorite time. And I have to say, like, I'm going to be leaving Los Angeles for a very long time. I'm not sure when I'll be back. And so these week's markets were very special because the market is part of my life. A lot of my friends are there. I know most of the vendors. I see them every week, if not more than once a week. Some people, David from Lily's, where I buy chickens and I buy eggs and I buy all my honey and my bee pollen. I see him sometimes 3 times a week. So these are some of my best friends, the people that I see most often. So it's a really, really special thing for me, and I'm really happy to share with you um, what I got on one of my last formal market trips to the LA markets. So Wednesday's market, again, Santa Monica Chef's Market. It opens at 8 o'clock for the public. If you are a chef or you would know this, you have a credential, you can get in a bit earlier with a pass. Um, but so I was shopping for 2 days. So I was shopping for what I was going to prepare on Wednesday and on Thursday. The meats that I found were beautiful, spiced, not spicy, but spiced, including spices. Beef sausage blend, so a ground beef that was grass-fed from a beautiful vendor called Pete and Barnett's. And they have a like a Polish beef sausage blend. And Polish sausage traditionally has caraway seed in it. It has things like fennel and coriander and cumin. All of those spices are conducive for breastfeeding and conducive for the postpartum constitution, the Vata imbalance. So that's a really good find. When I get home, if I buy a sausage that's encased in a sausage casing, I take my knife and I take that casing off. And then I usually either break it up, or if it's a bit firmer, I'll actually chop it and make it into like a minced meat and cook it that way. Again, this is specifically targeted to this phase. So this is a mom that's at the end of her postpartum time. The shop that I did today, I would not do for a mom who is in the first 2 or 3 days of her postpartum. She's not ready for everything I'm going to talk about today. Let's see what the actual spice blend is in Polish sausage. Let's look it up. Let's ask Google. Okay. It is, yeah. So black pepper, caraway, marjoram, salt, and coriander in this particular. So caraway, very, very, very conducive for breast milk. One of the best things you can have for your milk, caraway seed. If you like rye bread is made from rye wheat, the rye wheat berry, the variety, and that taste comes from caraway seed. So it's a bit tangy. I love it. So I always make sandwiches with rye bread when I go camping. It's my tradition. So grass-fed beef sausage. Um, I bought beef bones, grass-fed beef bones that were turned into stock, bone broth that I cook for 24 hours. Short ribs. So short ribs, grass-fed. They're a slow cooked form of red meat. Bone in. You want the bone in because again, you're focusing on really easy to digest cuts and you want those minerals extracted for the nutritional value. So this week was short ribs. I bought some beautiful Shaner eggs that are pastured, grass-fed, really high quality. And then from my buddies at Jimenez Family Farm, they have the most divine chicken sausages. All of their chicken sausages work for postpartum time, except for the spicy ones. So they have a hot Italian sausage that I would not give to my clients at any phase because it's just a little bit too hot and spicy. And we don't work with nightshades in a Vata imbalance because they can be a bit inflammatory. So nightshades are any peppers, which most spicy foods have some origin in a hot pepper, which is a nightshade. So that's cayenne, jalapeno, habanero, things like that. That's where spice comes from, even bell pepper, not for postpartum time. On the side note, side tangent, other nightshades include white potatoes, sweet potatoes, okay. Um, Tomatoes, actually, we don't give them postpartum, and eggplant. These things are also quite astringent. If you think of, we're in an air phase in postpartum time and we're dry. So what does eggplant do? It's astringent, it's like a sponge. It takes up moisture. It brings moisture out of your body. Right now in the postpartum phase, we need more moisture. We need to be hydrated and nourished. So these are some things that are not so compatible with this phase. And another phase would be balancing in other ways, just depending on, where you're landing with your constitution, your digestion. So chicken sausage, which was just spiced with salt and pepper again when I get home. However, I cook them, I'm going to take those casings off. The fruits that I found, beautiful, ripe, like heavy, juicy pomegranates. So that's a really nice antioxidant for the postpartum time. Um, and then the persimmons. So when I buy persimmons for my clients, persimmons can also be astringent. And most people, 9 times out of 10, are not selling or preparing persimmons properly. So there's two main kinds of persimmons that you're going to see in the market around this time of year. They're in season now. So one is a hachia, it looks like a teardrop. It's quite large and it's long. So if you can Google it too. So hachia is a big sort of teardrop shaped persimmon. And it's usually sold with the stem, the flower part down, and the point is up because they're quite delicate when they're ripe. If they're picked when they're still firm, it's kind of game over. They can ripen on the counter, but not so well. Some farmers will actually harvest them early because the birds get to them and they're really hard to protect. But when you're going to a market where they really do persimmons well, so Hollywood and Santa Monica, you'll see I found really good persimmons from Murray Family Farm this year. The classic persimmon, no one does them better, is JJ's Lone Daughter Ranch. They crush the persimmons. They are ex so expensive. They're one of the most expensive things you can find at the market, but you could buy one and experience it, and you should because they are absolute perfection. It's probably the most perfect persimmon in this Hachia variety I can imagine outside of Japan. Um, but okay, so Hachia is one variety, and the Hachia, if you buy it properly, it should be so soft, it's like jelly, you can barely touch it. So if they're not selling it in like an individual plastic cup or in like a little crate carrier, if you're buying more than one, it's probably not ripe enough. I mean, you really cannot hold it, and you certainly wouldn't put it in your bag. You need like a something protective to carry it. But it's soft, it's like jelly on the inside. That's one persimmon. The other persimmon is the little flat sort of donut Saturn shaped one that you see. And those are meant to be consumed more in a firm way. So you would slice those and add those to a salad. Those I love, but I don't serve them for postpartum. I stick with the jelly. I want the soft jelly pudding puree type, translucent. It literally looks like jelly. The hachia is what you want. You want that cinnamon honey jelly persimmon. So if you see those, if you find those are great. Another heirloom variety that I found at Murray Family Farms, this is a local stand for Los Angeles, is they've had these for a few years, a smaller persimmon called a Saijo, Saijo, Saijo persimmon. And this is a snacking persimmon. They're between a hachia, the pudding one, in consistency. They're quite small, but the consistency is between that soft jelly and the hard one, the more firm one. So they're soft enough, they're okay for postpartum. You would just sort of eat them. You could serve them, you could slice them and put them into sort of a breakfast dish, as, a garnish, or you could make a smoothie out of them. I decorated the top of a persimmon cake with them, which I use the jelly persimmons on the inside as part of the batter. So two types of persimmons I bought this week, both soft varieties and then pomegranate or the fruits. Then the green veg. So we had baby zucchini with the squash blossom attached, which I thought was really fun and beautiful. And anytime I can serve flowers, it's edible flowers are really nice for postpartum. They're enjoyable. They sort of represent femininity. They sort of honor the bloom and the harvest of the bloom. So I think just thematically or um, working within the celebratory efforts of congratulating her for her hard work. It's nice to serve flowers whenever you can. So I got some of those. And then the other green vegetable, again, I'm only shopping for 2 days, so I'm going to pick two green vegetables. So baby zucchini with squash blossoms attached, and then fennel. So fennel, you could say, well, it's white, but the top is green, so we're going to call it green. Fennel is one of the best things you can have for your milk. Eating fennel, roast it, again, nothing raw. I want you to cook everything that you give to them because cooking pre-digests it. So when you're in a constitution that you're looking for easy to digest food, you want it pre-digested through cooking. So you want to serve them nice, warm, well-cooked foods and shy away from things that are raw and cold, nothing frozen. Fennel is very, very, very good for their milk. If you can get your hands on fennel oil that's pressed and it's bright green and you can use that as a garnish, fabulous. Fennel seed is great in tea during this time. It's digestive, it helps them produce milk. Really good choices. And then color vegetables, because it's fall, the root vegetables tend to be quite abundant. So I actually did a bit more. I got beetroot, so red beets with the beet greens attached, which I love. I always look for ones that are pristine. Sometimes they're pulling the beet roots. The beets are larger, but the greens get kind of ratty. So I like a smaller beet because I like those beet greens. I like them to be a bit younger, so they're still tender, and you can take advantage of the fact that you've got sort of a 2-for-1 situation going on. You can have that red beetroot or that golden beetroot or even the kyojas, which are the peppermint swirl. They're all wonderful. But that beetroot and then also have a leafy green that's easy to digest. I got some celery root because I'm cooking short ribs. So I was thinking, oh, we could do a celery root puree instead of a white potato puree. So I picked up some celery root, which is one of my favorite vegetables. It's also called celeriac. It's a really funky looking, knobby, white root, and then it has a shoot that comes off the top that looks like celery. And it's similar to celery, but it's not the same. Um, and then oh, beautiful winter squash, my favorite winter squash, which are called black futsu. And they're just fabulous heirloom winter squash. They have a gorgeous cast, it's like a bloom on them. And they look like they're frosted and they have beautiful ridges that are really easy to get your knife into. They're easy to cut vegetable. We grew them for years at Green Gulch when I was there. And I think maybe we started growing them the year that I was there and they've grown them ever since. But just a delicious roasted pumpkin makes beautiful pumpkin soup. One of my favorites. So anytime I start to see them, I'm really excited. If you don't know what they look like, you can look it up. Black futsu. So Futsu. It's a Japanese variety. And then you'll see them in market. Let's see. Beans, the legumes that I got Blue Lake green beans, which are wonderful. Classic green bean, classic variety, and then Italian borlotti beans. So you can buy beans if they're in season, you might find them in their pods, and those are great because you don't have to soak them. You can cook them right away. They cook very quickly if they're not dried. The beans that we see in the grocery store on the shelves are dried. You can also find those at market. They're just a lot fresher. They've maybe been maybe they've been dried from the season before and they're shelf stable. I bought these beautiful Italian borlottis, which is also known as a cranberry bean. But I knew that my friend Rob was going to be able to source some wild chanterelles. So I wanted to saute some chanterelle mushrooms again because we're in last phase postpartum and I wanted to have those with my with a beautiful like borlotti, brothy bean with golden sautéed mushrooms. Um, And then, so then you start to think, okay, you've gotten your main events. I don't usually buy grains at the market because the market is more for fresh produce. I keep the grains organized in the pantry, and a lot of times I buy those ahead of time. So grains that I go to a lot are wheat berry, rice. You can use risotto rice. You can use like a kokuho rose is one of my favorite varieties of rice. You can do quinoa. I cook with millet. I cook with farro. Um, I cook with wild rice. I love, especially in fall. Wild rice is actually a seed. Any seed. So some grains, you think of them in the grain category, but they're actually seeds. Most seeds are also complete proteins. So quinoa is a complete protein. Amaranth is a complete protein. These are things, barley is really good for milk as well. That's a true grain, not a complete protein. It's a grain. Um, but yeah, those things, they work into the menus later, but I don't usually source them at market. Um, Healthy fats I get at market, a lot of avocados. I buy olive oils at market if I can find a good one. I get olives. There's a vendor that goes to Santa Monica and to Hollywood if you're local to LA called Adams Ranch. They make the most fabulous olives. They have good olive oil too. There's a woman who goes to Hollywood named Sabrina, and she has a really wonderful olive oil that comes in a clear black glass bottle with a little narrow white label. You'll see her. She's on the north end of the market. Um, on the east, on the west side, north end of market, if you're looking at market like across to the west. She has nice olive oil. Um, my clients have a beautiful olive oil company. You won't find it at the farmer's market, but you can find it at Cookbook, which is a local market that we have, or you can order it online. It's called Inez, Inez, and it's farmed in Santa Ynez, in the Santa Ynez Valley, and it is fabulous. Highly recommend. Um, Healthy fats. The other healthy fats I get a lot. Again, I'm in California, so raw almonds. And there's a vendor that sells cold press almond oil too, also really great as a moisturizer, really great to massage your babies with. That vendor is called Fat Uncle, and they go to both Hollywood and Santa Monica markets. You can find that. Ask them for that oil. Um, I love making almond milk. I make a lot of nut milk, mostly almond milk. So if you're working with someone Ayurveda, we will use quite a lot of cow dairy. It's indicated never, it's always cooked. So we boil it or we heat it and we drink it as a tonic, or we might put it into a warm porridge. But we do per Ayurveda, we do incorporate quite a bit of cow dairy. Um, the non the non-dairy preference, if you're going to substitute, is almond milk and fresh almond milk. I would make a thick almond milk. That would be my recommendation. I buy almonds in bulk from the farmer's market, and they're always soaked and prepared properly. I always take the skins off. And if you're in the mentorship, I'm going to show you how to do all of this. I'm going to show you how I soak, blanch, and peel almonds and then make a thick almond milk, which if you're using a really high quality almond, you'll never taste anything quite like that. Um, I also, years ago, I invested some seed money in a farm. They do olives and almonds in Sicily, near the famous town of Noto, where Cafe Sicilia is. It's nearby there. And I own like a short track of almonds, almond trees. And every year they send me these bags of wild Sicilian almonds, and somewhere there's like a plaque hanging on this tree that has my name, these trees that have my name on it. But there's different varieties of almonds, and if you dig deep enough, you can play around with the flavors because the wild almonds are very, very potent. So if you're using a high quality almond or you're using a wilder or more heirloom variety, you can have this super strong almond flavor that will just delight you to no end. I call it liquid marzipan, and I highly recommend it to everybody. Um, okay, let's see how we're doing on time. Great, 30 minutes in. So it's just some other little fun things that I picked up, some edible calendula. So there are, if you do your research, you can find some flowers at market that are edible. Borage is edible, which is a beautiful little medicinal flower. I see it sometimes. Calendula blossoms are edible. Dianthus are edible. I don't see those sold at market very often, but chive blossoms, fennel blossoms, cilantro blossoms, all edible flowers. And those are just fun and delightful and delight your clients and just bring a little bit of sparkle to your food. I picked up some herbs. So it's fall, so the bronze fennel, which is like a fennel frond, but the bronze fennel is just a different cast. It's a fennel that I always loved planting because it's bronze. I mean, it has, you know, grounded like brown notes to it, and it looks great in the field, and it tastes just like normal fennel, but it's kind of nice to have as a garnish. And as you know, we are using a lot of fennel because it's very conducive for the postpartum time because it boosts the milk supply. And then garlic chives. So I don't use a lot of alliums in postpartum cooking. Alliums are the garlic family. So garlic, onion, red onion, shallot, the bigger roots that are really spicy, like anything that you would cut into and it would make you cry, I tend to shy away from. I use more aromatics like ginger. Um, when she's a little further in her phase, I'll start to integrate a bit of allium. So, but I do the softer ones, chives, the more gentle ones. Garlic chives are a Chinese variety. They're like a flat leaf green allium, and you would cut them with your kitchen scissors the same as you would cut a chive. I do green onions sometimes if they're not too potent. I'll use really young leeks, like really fresh young leeks that are in season right now. If it's springtime, I would do like spring garlic, which is, like the very, very young garlic that when it first starts to sprout, you can find that in market, garlic scapes, things like that. This time I did pick up some garlic chives, fresh laurel leaves, so fresh bay leaves. It's also known as bay laurel. I cook with a lot of fresh bay. It's one of my favorite things. They always say like, again, thematically, like bay represents courage. So the ancient Romans, they would ride into battle with a crown of laurels on to to symbolize courage, riding into battle in the chariot. So when I'm with a mom in labor, I infuse a lot of bay leaf, torn bay leaf into like a simmer pot. And we've infused the air with that aromatic. And I cook with a lot of bay. If the recipe calls for 2 bay leaves, I'll put 5 fresh in. And if you can find fresh bay leaves, I highly recommend because the notes are amazing. It's sweet and aromatic and just delicious. Now, at market, a lot of markets, not always you can find curry leaf. And curry leaf, I always cook cabbage with curry leaf, which is a traditional Indian ingredient. You have to sort of know what it looks like, but um, let's see who carries it. So there's 2 vendors. See, they don't go to both markets. There's an Asian vendor called Yao Chin, and I buy lots of things from them. I do a lot of their Asian greens. I get my ginger there. They usually have curry leaves. They go to Hollywood and Santa Monica. And then this week I found curry leaves at Coleman Family Farms in Santa Monica. So if you ask around, you can find curry leaves. You can always find them in Indian markets. The one that I go to is called the Pioneer Cash and Carry on 183rd Street in Artesia. Um, that's where you can source curry leaves. You call ahead if you're going to go down to Little India to Artesia because they usually only have them on Sundays. and you have to get there between 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock to get curry leaves. But curry leaves, if you've ever traveled to India, that is the smell to me that represents Indian cooking. It's a very distinct smell, and it's absolutely divine. If you buy curry leaves, you only use a few, and usually you buy a stem, and they have many leaves on one stem. So if they're fresh, what you can do is take those leaves off the stem. You can wash them, dry them up, and then stick them in the freezer once they're completely dry, and they preserve beautifully. And then every time you're using curry leaves in your cooking, you just bring your little jar of frozen curry leaves out of the freezer and you drop them into your pot. And suddenly they're revived and they're just like they were when you froze them, fresh. So that's how I do it. And then rosemary, really fresh, beautiful rosemary is in season right now. Not in season, but I always pick them up. And again, they are in season. We're in California, but many of you are joining from other parts of the world, and California has, of course, very long growing season. We're tropical. We are still growing limes. If you are joining from New York or Europe, most of the rest of the world, you're not going to see limes, fresh limes in your farmer's market. But lime is a wonderful alkaline citrus to use in your postpartum cooking. So when I'm cooking, if I have access to limes, I do usually have them on hand in the kitchen. I add them to fresh water. I garnish with them. My go-to garnish spread when I'm serving a lot of postpartum food, especially the lentil stews and the savory congis and kitcheries and things like that. I garnish with a squeeze of lime, black pepper, cilantro, and cut basil and olive oil. That goes on top of everything. Um, it's the perfect combination, and you're able to infuse your finished food with a bit of punchy flavor and extra nutrients. Garnishes are a godsend, godsend garnishes. Okay, so what did I actually make from all of this? So once I've done my haul, I've gotten all of my stuff I've gathered. I look down and I've got, I've got two beautiful proteins for the week. I've got, or for the days I'm cooking, two proteins, two dark leafy greens. Did I talk about greens? Let's see. I think greens did not make it onto my notes list here, but I'll tell you what I bought. I bought spinach. I had the beet greens from the top of the beets that I bought, and I got arugula. So these are non-brassica. What's brassica? Brassica are the harder to digest greens. So that's kale. Uh, Wait, what are the brassicas? Okay. Kale, collards, the hard stuff, like the stuff that really takes a long time to cook. I don't cook so much of that. I cook the more delicate stuff. Arugula, easiest to digest green. I cook a lot of mustard greens. Chard is another really good option for dark leafy greens for the postpartum time. Spinach is always a good choice. Mustard greens, did I say that? My favorite green of all time. Once I planted a whole garden just of mustard greens. If you're going to plant a garden, plant mustard greens. They're so easy to grow, or arugula. So easy to grow, so nutritious. Great for this time. I still don't really serve them raw. I'll, put a handful in at the end of cooking if I'm making a stew or something. So once I get home, I've got all my stuff. All the categories are checked off. I'm starting to put things away. I get back to the kitchen. I process everything. I store everything properly. And then I sit down and I look at what I have. I usually put the spread out. I organize the fridge and then I put everything on the counter and I just start to put things together, what would go with what from that haul. So I'm thinking of like what flavor combinations. And then as I'm going through that process, I'm categorizing, I'm sort of seeing what plays well with what. Then the finished dish will come to me. I call it a kitchen vision. So this week, and I always write my menus out on this everlasting notepad. And my sweet friend Rachel Saunders, who is a wonderful ceramicist, makes these ceramic glazed notepads, and you can write on them. I write on them with a dry erase marker, and then you can just wipe them clean and start again. So my menus, It's a ceremony I always light some incense and pay homage to, the wellness of all beings, the happiness of all beings. And then I write my menus. So this week, nice autumn seasonally inspired menus for postpartum. I did a breakfast frittata. And in that breakfast frittata, we had green onion, the garlic chives. I roasted the beetroot, so it had beets in it with their greens. I actually added some arugula that I had. I had some nettle left over from a previous shop. Like the best. If you can find fresh nettle, the best dark leafy green. You can give her so high in minerals, like the best. Her hair will be growing like crazy if you can find fresh nettles. Um, and then I topped that frittata with those beautiful squash blossoms. I picked up some goat cheese at the market as well. So that went into the frittata. And then so fun fact, the squash blossoms, there's when you're harvesting a zucchini blossom, the blossom has a male or a female. If it has a little zucchini attached, like a little baby zucchini attached, and at the stem is coming or actually at the other end, not the stem end. The stem is what's connected to the vine. If the blossom end has a little zucchini coming onto it, that's a female. If it has baby zucchini, that's a female. If it's a male zucchini flower, it ha only has a little stem. Fun fact. Um, these were female because they had little baby zucchinis. So those I peeled and chopped um, to add into the frittata. So that was baby zucchini. So a breakfast frittata, which keeps nicely in the fridge, and then you can cut it into slices or squares and have that for breakfast or for a snack. Breastfeeding moms are really hungry, so they need a lot of protein throughout the day. So breakfast frittata with green onion cooked really far down. Like when I do cook alliums, I cook them on low and I cook them till they're really soft because it takes out the sharpness and the spiciness and makes it more conducive for the postpartum constitution. So green onion, garlic chives, red beets, which went on the bottom so they didn't bleed, beet greens, arugula, nettles, squash blossoms, goat cheese, and baby zucchini. So she had that for breakfast. Then we made, oh, this congee situation was really good. So I made a white rice congee, and that was made with the beef bone broth. So I made a beef bone broth from those bones, and then the beef sausage that I had bought. Again, I removed the case and chopped that up, and that went on the top, sort of as like a minced meat little center. You could also serve that, with a soft-boiled egg added in. Really, really nice. It had green beans in it. It had mustard greens. It was really, really, really good. Really good. So sort of a minced beef rice congee was what she had for breakfast that day. Um, the frittata we served with sliced avocado and a bit of like massaged and dressed arugula salad on the side with just some lime and flake salt, olive oil. Um, I boiled some rosemary tea. That's sort of an English thing. You can drink tea with black honey or molasses. It's really good for your skin, really, really good for your skin. But the minerals in the molasses, the darker the honey, also, it's more medicinal. You never ever boil honey, ever. If you're making tea, like I would boil the rosemary for maybe 5 minutes. Let that cool, take the rosemary out so it doesn't get too bitter or strong. And then once that tea is in your teacup, you're going to let that really cool. And maybe 10 minutes. It'll sit there so it's not hot, 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 hot enough to melt the honey, but not hot enough to cook the honey. And then you would just stir a spoonful of black honey if you can find it. And if not, a bit of molasses is really, really great for the postpartum. It's almost like a tea tonic. It's really good. Let's see. Let me pull up my photos too. We cooked a lot this week. There's the frittata. Um, the congee had ginger in it. It was lovely. And then the next day, so braised short ribs with mustard greens. So got those, short ribs slow cooking. And then I cooked up some chanterelles, which I found my friend Robert had brought to the Topanga Farmers Market, which I was not the far Topanga, not the farmers market, but the Topanga Canyon Gourmet in Topanga, which I passed by. They have a little market there. So I sauteed up those chanterelles and then I cooked the borlotti beans, which are those cranberry beans. I cooked those down in a broth with just a little bit of garlic because we're in the last phase and they're just so divine with garlic. And then serve the beans with the little chanterelles on the top. Um, I roasted that black futsu squash with some coriander and nutmeg. Nutmeg is the queen spice of postpartum time, great for the end stage of pregnancy before the labor starts as well. I did a really beautiful celeriac puree. So that celery root you can boil like you would boil a potato, and then you can put it in a food processor with herbed milk. You could use almond milk if you were non-dairy. And then put just like some chives and um, some beautiful, what other herbs did we put in there? Leek. Oh, I put leek. I sauteed some leek and put that in the milk infusion and then used that with ghee to cream the celeriac. So that was the base of the short ribs. And then those cooked down, slow cooked short ribs went on top. It was divine. So you had roasted squash on the side, your borlotti beans with the sauteed chanterelles on the top. Um, and then, so we always want to hit a grain category. So when I went in to process the celeriac, I also had boiled some millet, and millet is really great to mix into any sort of mash, vegetable mash, or puree. So a mashed potato or sweet potato. You could do a mashed pumpkin. Last night I did um, a mashed celery root, which I love with beef. And if I want to just get a grain in, because again, nutritionally, we want her to be having like the right kind of grain, easy to digest grain, but definitely including grain. Um, a lot of times by now they're kind of tired of anything that's too repetitive. So I try to get inventive. Sometimes I'll just make the grain disappear, but I'll puree, especially like a millet. It makes a really, really nice. You wouldn't do this with any grain, specifically millet. Millet is great for mashes. In fact, I think one of the main millet brands that you could find is Eden, which is an organic one, and they may even have a recipe on the back of the packet for like a millet mashed potato. So that's like a sneaky way to get your grain in without feeling like you've got like a side of rice on the side on the side of your plate. And then I made the most divine. I actually made two because Thanksgiving is coming up, but I made a little persimmon cake. And the persimmon cake took that soft hachia puree, which I just scooped out the center of those soft persimmons, put that in the batter with some Tehachapi grain flour, which is a local heirloom organic wheat. So they take the wheat berries and they grind it into a flour and they sell it here locally. So I use that flour with Okinawan dark sugar, which is very high in mineral. We cook a lot with the Ayurvedic sugar called jaggery, which is a raw sugar cane that's been dehydrated. Like basically the sugar cane juice has been extracted and then it's dehydrated and you can buy it in a soft block. That's a great way to cook. That's a great sweetener to use in postpartum, along with things like dates, maple syrup. A lot of the sugars are very high in minerals. So this one I used a specialty Japanese Okinawan sugar, but a very dark one because of its mineral content. It's very beneficial during this time. Black sesame went into that batter, nutmeg, a little bit of cinnamon, a bit of ginger powder, pistachios, beautiful, perfect medjool dates from Mr. Bautista. We're selling the white box dates right now. That's like very short season, but the best date you'll ever have in your life. It's usually what I buy for Christmas. I just buy boxes and boxes of these perfect white dates. You can find them probably the next 2 or 3 weeks in the farmer's market. I'll just show you here. I don't know if you all can see. Um, that's the inside. That's what they look like. Fabulous, like so soft and perfect. That is the perfect date. This is what the persimmon cake look like. You can see it on my Instagram. Okay. And that was that. It was a lot of food. Um, Intuitive cooking is really fun. So it might be overwhelming. I don't really write recipes when I'm cooking like this. I write recipes more when I'm sitting down to do content. When I'm actually cooking in person, um, I just kind of get the stuff at market and then I go into the kitchen and I cook it. Um, if it's helpful, the other thing you could do is the other thing that you could do if you feel like you're less fluent in the kitchen, go to market, get all your stuff, bring it back, look at it, and then look up recipes. So if you're like, I have these beautiful persimmons, what do I do? You could type in persimmon bread or persimmon cake, and there would be a James Beard recipe that comes up for James Beard's famous persimmon cake. You could follow that recipe just with the produce that you have. You don't have to be able to spin recipes off the top of your head like I do. That's not necessary. You can, and that's another really fun thing to do. And I do that sometimes. That's really the only time I'll use Google to look up recipes is when I'm looking at a produce spread and I'm like, okay, I have these pumpkins and I want to make a soup and I also have fresh oregano and I'll type in those ingredients that I kind of know go together and then I'll have a recipe brought up that links it all together and then I can fill in the blanks. That's a really great way to do it. You do kind of have to know what vegetables, even though they are in season, which vegetables are easier to digest than others. That just kind of takes some practice, and some like working with the categories, getting the lists, and then just jumping into the field and like working with it. And in the beginning, you do it the first few years, you go in and you kind of have to look things up as you go. So it's a bit more work. And then the more you shop seasonally, the more you shop uh the farms, if you will, like you get more and more fluent. And the farmers help you. Um, at this point, like there's a handful of people who go to a market that are the actual farmer, the growers themselves. Not all of them, not everybody at the farmer's market are the growers. Sometimes they have market staff that like just does markets and goes and sells, and they don't know so much about the produce, um, but there's definitely a handful of core stands that I will go to that are my usual vendors, and the farmers themselves are coming. So if you can sort of parse out who those people are, and you do it just by going to market and having conversations with them, they'll help you. A lot of them, my friends say a lot like farmers don't know how to cook and cooks don't know how to farm. But that's not always true. You can learn a lot just by shopping and talking and having conversations. And I encourage you all to have some fun at the farmers market this fall. Autumn is the best season, especially if you're in California. I ate a watermelon this week from Munyak, which is our go-to tomato vendor. They are still growing watermelons in November, and it wasn't a bad watermelon for November. I don't know if it's climate change or what, but if you are joining from California and you have access to these kinds of markets, um, it's such a joy, it's such a treat. Lots of areas have really fabulous markets, and work this into your weekly rhythm. Write to me if you have any questions, if you there's anything that we've talked about you want to know more about, if you have any thoughts or comments or want to tell me what you found or you see something at market you don't know what it is or how to use it, DM me or write to me, put a comment on one of my posts. I love talking about food. I'm such a food nerd. Um, and I'm like always willing to talk about produce and farming and gardening and cooking. So, um, in the mentorship, when we get going, so mentorship starts in January, the wait list is going to open to a pre-sale on the 30th of November. So if you're on the wait list, you're going to get first access to the overall mentorship. And this is going to be a 6-month direct group mentorship with me. I'm going to talk to you all. We're going to build your practice together. So I'm going to take you through all the steps that I use every time I restructure my practice. So I go through and I reorganize it bit by bit. So I'll show you my organizational structure. I'll talk to you about all the services I offer, how I vet clients, how I get clients, how I interview them, how they interview me. Um, I'll talk you through how I take care of myself, all my routines and rhythms and my whole lifestyle. I'm going to take you through, how I do everything. It's the first time I've ever really opened the doors and said, this is how my practice runs. Um, and then in the second half, so we're going to go through, it's a 6-month mentorship. The first 3 months is going to be sort of an outlined. I'm taking you through these 3 themes. So the first theme is first foundationally, how do we take care of ourselves? So what are the things we can do through the lens of Ayurveda, through the lens of functional nutrition, or even the spiritual practice of Japanese Zen, which I've integrated 3 years, for years into my practice. How do we put a form in place that first protects ourselves before we start to give? That's first phase. We're going to spend a month on that. Second phase is, what are our offerings? What offerings do I offer my clients? How do I do it? How do I talk to them about my offerings? How do I organize my offerings and curate them? And then I want you all to talk about what unique offerings you're going to bring to the table. Because my offerings are, sort of a layered product of my life and my careers before I became the doula. And, you'll have layers too that are unique to you, and we can all learn from each other. But I'm going to show you how I do everything and how it's structured. And then the last phase, we're going to talk about the flow. So how do we how do we create a repeatable, automated, sustainable flow? How do you network? What do how do you build your community, which builds your clientele? How do you get a system in place where, you're taking the menial tasks off of your workload so that you can create offers that are, yes, they can be tailored to your specific clients, but are ultimately repeatable, because that's going to save you time once you get a system and a flow in place. It's really important for doing that. And then the second half of the mentorship, which is what I'm going to call the living practice, we're going to shift into office hours. So in office hours, I'm going to take you through the steps, the actual homework tasks that you're going to need to complete in order to produce a fully functioning practice. And we're going to open up office hours. I'm going to give you challenges and tasks to complete. In every office hour, you'll have something that's due, and you're going to submit it. In the office hours, I will review it, or we'll have special guests to come in who will review those for you. We've got a human design person that's going to come in and do human design readings for you all, and then talk about your unique self-care structure, and also, evaluate your workload structure and your scheduling structure with clients and help you understand if that kind of energy output is conducive for the type of personality that you have, the type of human design that you have. Really beneficial. You're gonna have, you'll have live market sessions with me where I'll go to market in the morning, and then I'll actually get you all on Zoom when I'm back in my own kitchen, and we'll go through everything. And we'll do seasonal cooking demos for all 4 phases. of the postpartum time. I'm going to give you sample recipes. I'm going to have you all write your menu plans as a homework assignment, and then we're going to review them all together. Um, you'll see everyone else's meal plans too. We'll put together a cohort recipe book for your season, which you all will have that's unique to you, that you can cook from, that you've co-created with your mentees, your mentor mates. Um, the list is like, it just goes on and on. You're going to love this mentorship. And it's meant to be really co-created with you all. So before we go into the living practice phase, the last 3 weeks, I'm also just going to open it up for you all to request what you think you need. I have lots of ideas about what I think you need, but I want to know what you think you need too, and we will curate it for you. So it's a supported journey that, you know, I certainly could have skyrocketed if I'd had something like this at the beginning of my practice. In a lot of ways, like I always say, like, postpartum is kind of the last frontier. There's not really a blueprint like this that's for the postpartum time. And the postpartum time is very overwhelming because there's lots of different offerings that could fall into this phase, this category. And so it takes some time to really hone in, what works for you, what works best for your client body, but also, what lights you up and what is sustainable for you and what structure. You can structure your practice in, countless different ways. And it's definitely a creative endeavor. So it's something that we can all benefit from, to sort of have a container, a space, a organized outline to work through a lot of these processes together, and I'll be here to guide you through it. I'm going to be in Europe when it starts, so you're going to get to drop right into my little cozy winter cottage. I'll be cooking from the cottage in England. Um, it's going to be divine. And I really hope that you'll all join me. Waitlist opens. The waitlist is live now, so you can jump on it. You're all on it. You'll see that presale go live on the 30th of November. And then you'll have a bit of time to join at the discounted rate, which is available only to the wait list. You'll also have access to a payment plan to make it a little more accessible, especially around the holiday season to sign up. You can pay in installments instead of investing all at once. Um, and it's just going to be a really good time. I hope that many of you can join and go create this together. I'm so excited to see everything you all are bringing to the table. And hopefully we have a new wave of postpartum support because clients are looking for it. It's becoming more and more sought after, and really good, sustainable, reliable postpartum support, in my experience, is hard to find. So these families really need great support, and they're wanting great support, and the work is so rewarding. It can be exhausting, but if you go about it right, in the right way, um, it's the most rewarding, enjoyable thing you could ever do. And it's why I've done it for so long. Hopefully can scale so that we can just have a bigger and bigger community. That's what it's all about. I'm sending love to you all. I hope that you have a beautiful Thanksgiving and a beautiful fall, and I will see you all on social, or hopefully back in our workshop soon. And some of you I will see in our cohort.